Good evening, everybody, and thanks for tuning in to episode 7 of the Matt O Scale Train podcast. I am your host, Matt Rochford, and with me, as always, is my co-host,
Matt Suzuha.
Matt, how you doing tonight?
Oh, wonderful. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good.
So tonight, we want to go over train maintenance, and what I mean by that is we want to go over how to maintain your train collection. That would include your engines, your rolling stock, more importantly, your track and your layout itself, which definitely needs to be maintained, and a couple of miscellaneous items. So just kind of sit tight and just kind of hang in there, and we're going to try to cover everything we can just from information that we pulled and from our own experience keeping our train and layout maintained. So I'll kind of first go over a couple of points, the things that I do. I think the most important part here is keeping your track clean, because you can run into all kinds of strange issues if you have a dirty track. Now, believe it or not, if you look at your track, it may look like it's clean, but technically it may not be. And what I say to that is there is something called a carbon buildup. And what that is it's just from the dust, from running your trains, from your smoke, just kind of everything in the environment. You get this kind of thin film that builds up, and it's on your rollers too. And you'll kind of get that if you take like a thin towel, like a paper towel or a Kleenex or something, and you wipe the rails and you look at the Kleenex and it has like a black kind of like film on it. That's carbon, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's just something that you have to clean, and basically, if you don't, your engines are going to have problems getting a signal. They're going to have problems drawing power from the middle rail, and you're going to have all kinds of miscellaneous issues. I'll take for an example. Just a couple weeks ago, I was running my F7 around my layout, and unfortunately, it was stalling on a certain part, and I couldn't figure it out. It wasn't turning off; it would just stall there, and the cab lights would flash like it was having like communication problems. And I thought that was really strange. And I'm like, all right, well, I got my train off the track, and I decided, you know what, I'm just going to clean that one part of the track just to see what happens. And lo and behold, I cleaned up the track, and bam, there it went, no problems. So that's how important it is to keep your track clean. And if you ask me, like, well, Matt, how what's the timeline for this? How do I keep my track clean? Like, should I do it once a week, every 2 weeks? I guess that would depend on your environment, on where your layout's at. Technically, if your layout's kind of in a high dust area, you probably want to clean your track maybe every 2 weeks. If you're kind of in a ventilated area that has air moving around quite a bit, you could probably get away with like doing it once a month. It also depends on how much you're running your trains, right? Because when you're running your trains, you got your roller on the middle rail and your wheels on the outside rails. You're constantly pushing air around. You're gonna get, your tracks are gonna get dirty. So you kind of have to factor in several things. The air environment that you're in, how much you're running your train, and if you have any kind of air purification system going. So I try to clean mine probably at least once a month. If I remember to do it once a month, I usually don't have any issues. But also you can just kind of do the finger test, right? Just take a Kleenex or a tissue, wipe it. Look at the bottom of your rollers on your engines that you're using the most. Do they have a lot of carbon on them? A lot of buildup? It's probably time to clean your track. So in order to do that, what I use, people have different ways. People have come up with, everyone has their little opinion on how to clean track and stuff like that. And that's fine. Everyone has a certain way. I use track and rail cleaner, and It's called Track and Rail Cleaner. It's AC. The model or the product number is ACT-6006. It is from a local area by me, so it's in the Western Springs, Illinois. It's from Aero Dash Car Hobby Lubricants. I'm sure this can be found in under other names and too as well. But what's so special about this is it is a cleaner, but it also has a special oil in it that will help maintain an electrical connection. So it really helps clean the track. It really helps get your engine with pulling in power from the middle rail. I even use this to clean the rollers. So if I get a new engine in, or if I'm having problems, I clean the track. I clean the rollers of anything that's running on the track, and I swear by this stuff. This stuff is awesome. So get yourself a nice cleaner. You can go to your local hobby shop. You can go online. I'll actually put the product itself that I'm using in the show notes. That way you can get it. I'll put the website on there as well. That way you can, if you're interested in buying it, you can buy it right over the web. Matt, how about yourself?
So for me, as far as like cleaning track goes, I'll kind of hit some of the points you hit on. So as far as the time, with some of the things in this hobby, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, later on in this episode, there's no real set time to do it. It's not like changing the oil in your car. So, sometimes when you're running your trains, you may have spots where you don't have to clean your track, for a while, or in certain sections might be dirtier than others. And for me, not only do I gauge how about the track and how that's clean, I use that to also gauge voltage. If I'm having voltage issues and the track is still clean, I know that I got an issue somewhere else besides the track, which that's something to keep in mind too. It can also be a troubleshooting thing, not only just be a cleaning thing. And then as far as cleaning the track goes, I use a bunch of different things. I used to use the track cleaner that came with the MTH maintenance kit, which Lionel makes a similar kit as well if you're curious. But I used to use that. I ran out of it. So what I've been using for the most part now these days is paint thinner, which you got to be careful with it because it's flammable. But you can use it, and it does a great job. So, like Matt said, there's a tons of different schools of thought on this. If you ask 10 people, you get 10 different answers. Do what's best for you as far as this goes. But for me, that's what I like to use. However, I do want to try that stuff you recommend, and I'm going to give that a try soon here. That sounds really, really good.
It is. It is. I found it at my local railroad hobby shop. They had a bunch of them there, and I asked about it, and they're like, yeah, this stuff really works. And it works for almost anything. Slot cars, any kind of hobby. It doesn't have to be just trains. It could be almost anything that you need to that has a track that requires an electrical contact for the vehicle to move around. The stuff will clean it. So yeah, really, really happy with it. I haven't used paint thinner. I'd be more afraid of the fumes. Does it give off a lot of fumes, paint thinner?
No, not really. I mean, what I usually do is I usually put it on a Q-tip or something like that. And I don't put very much. I put maybe like a water bottle capsize full at a time. I don't take the whole bottle and throw it in a container.
No, gotcha. Okay.
No, just a little bit.
All right. I was gonna say you better have some air filtration going there.
Oh yeah, you got to be careful with it. But sometimes, if I can get away with just using a dry paper towel just to get the crap out of the center rail is the worst.
Yes.
The two outer rails, they get the crap from the traction tire, but really the center rail is the issue, and you really got to watch that one because you got to think you have one hot and two grounds. So, the hot's where you're going to run into your issues. So if it's not really that bad and I can just put a little elbow grease into it, I'll just use a dry paper towel. But if it's really bad pad, I'll get the thinner out and start wetting it until I can get it all off.
Yeah, I also have a I don't know what it's exactly called, but in the MTH maintenance kit, it's kind of like a really fine um rubbing stuff. Like I don't know what the right name for it is.
Like a
But
denatured alcohol?
well, no, it's like a pad, and you hold it like a pad, and on the bottom of it, it's like a really kind of like fine surface, and you use it you just kind of scrape it along the rails, and it takes it's kind
Okay,
of like a
yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Mr. Clean pads, the ones that are that have like a really soft surface on the bottom, you can use it on like metal and stuff like that. It does a good job. I use it on the really kind of the parts of the track that have that really large buildup of carbon on it, and you take this thing and you can kind of just rub it. I would use this to touch it up or to get out the most difficult spots. As far as general cleanup though, like using like you and I use some type of liquid to kind of like actually clean the track is absolutely needed.
Cool.
Yeah, and I forgot to say, I actually there are parts of my layout that I can't get to. So what I have is I have one of these. They're they're a car made for cleaning, and what it is it's just it's a car, but on the bottom of it is two clamps, and you can basically screw or clamp a couple of pads to it. So what I do is I turn it over. I put fresh pads on each one. I pour enough of the liquid that I have into each pad so the pads are nice and kind of like, they're not dripping wet, but they're soaked enough where they're going to be able to clean the track. And then I'll run that behind, one of my little diesels. And I'll run that around my track like, I don't know, like 2-3 times on each loop. And that's pretty much how I do it because, like I said, there's parts of my track I can't get to, so I don't have much of a choice. But I kind of like doing this because I can, put the pad on there, turn my train on, and just kind of sit back and let it go around. And it does it. I'm pretty impressed. It does a good job.
That's cool. I've thought about getting one of those track cleaning cars, and I don't really have a section that I really can't reach, at least not yet. I'm sure eventually I will, but I've thought about getting that, but for now it's not really necessary. But
Gotcha.
I should probably spring for one because Lord knows I'll need it sometime, I'm sure.
Okay. So let's talk about actual locomotive maintenance. So I'll kind of explain some things that I do when I get a new engine and then things that I do for my current engines. So when I take an engine out of the box, so if I get a new train and I take it out of the box, it's whether it be used or new, I do a couple of things. Number one, I always turn it over, and I always oil the axles. I'll oil the rods between the drivers. I'll oil just kind of any of the moving parts, obviously, on the bottom of an engine. So the rollers and the axles are probably the most. If you're dealing with a diesel, then you're going to have rollers and axles. If you got a steam engine, then you're going to have some rods on the drivers that you might have to oil. Now, just so everyone knows, a little bit goes a long way. So you just need a dab of oil. It's kind of hard to put that into actual what it is, but if you have a dropper, which is what you should be using, like a little I use a pin needle dropper
Yeah,
when I
that's
do
what I
oiling,
use too.
because I don't want to I don't want to actually spill like a whole bunch of oil on something because cleaning up oil is the absolute worst. And number two is you don't want to put too much oil on something because what happens is because oil is has a viscosity to it. It has a like a kind of a thickness to it. It will actually pick up dirt and stuff. So you don't want to put too much on because you don't want stuff to collect in the oil. And then the other part that I do is when you have a diesel engine, at least, that you usually have like the visible gears on the bottom, and I'll take a little bit of grease And I'll like put one drop on each. You don't need to put it on the whole thing, because what happens is you put one little drop on one of the gears, and then when you're running around, when you run around the track, that's that grease is going to get kind of moved. It's going to get thrown from all the gears. So you just need to put it on one. You could put it on another one too, like one that's kind of farther away. But I tend to, again, use the whole a little bit goes a long way. Um, so uh, so I'll do the oil. I'll do the grease. At that point, I will just kind of check all these screws. I like to check to make sure everything is tight, that there's that there's no play with stuff that shouldn't have play on it. Check the guardrails. I'll check to make sure that there's no loose parts on the engine. I'll flip it up. I will. I usually don't put smoke in it until I actually put it on the layout, because when I get an engine, I want to make sure that I usually smoke fluid is the last thing I do, because I don't want to have to put smoke in an engine and then flip it over, just to kind of avoid that new fluid kind of leaking out at the top. So I'll usually try to get everything I can done, even program it when I can. Like sometimes I'll drop like 2 or 3 drops in there, or I'll shut the smoke unit off, put it on the track, get it programmed, and then turn the smoke unit back on, fill up the smoke unit, and at that point test the smoke to make sure it's okay. And I'll run it around the layout for probably between like 3 and 5 minutes, just to kind of break it in. Again, if you get a new engine, you don't want to put it on the track and put it up to 50 scale miles. Would totally avoid that. It's a motor, and it needs to be properly broken in. So even if it's used, and if it's not an MTH engine, well, I don't know how many miles are on the thing, right? So I just treat them all the same. I'll run it around 10 to 15 scale miles per hour around my layout for about 5 minutes, just to kind of break in the oil, get that grease going in the gears, and stuff like that. So I'll also kind of check you really, back in the day, because they use incandescent bulbs, you have to check those. But nowadays with LEDs, that's not really a thing. I don't think knock on wood, I don't think I've ever had an LED go out yet on anything I own, which they shouldn't. They should last pretty long. How about yourself, Matt?
Well, for me, my philosophy is kind of similar to yours in that when I get an engine, I usually will give it some sort of oil or grease. What I do with my oil and grease is I go one step further with it. I put it on my workbench, and on my workbench I have a test track, and I also have it's a homemade engine cradle with like a towel on there.
Yep.
And what I do is steam or diesel. What I do is I have alligator test clips, and I throw the test clips on so it's not on the track. I just have it upside down in the cradle, and I fire it up and run it. And sometimes I put it on full throttle, run it wide open, just to really get that grease and oil in there, especially for steam. For steam, I'll run them wide open and let it really get in there, do what it has to do, avoid any squeaks or squeals or any annoyances with that long before it even touches a track the correct way, and get it all going. If it's an MTH, I always check the battery, especially in a 5-volt PS2 or even just a 3-volt PS2. That's just what you should do. I know people don't. You check your speakers too while you're at it if you're into modern command control engines. But as far as general maintenance goes, after I give it oil and grease and give it a shot on clips, then I'll throw it on the track and let it run and have my fun with it. Smoke, I kind of do what you do. I don't run the smoke when it's in the cradle. When I throw it on the track, I'll throw some fluid in it, let it rip. But I basically do the same thing as you do. You know what? That's a proven way, and that's just the easiest way, in my opinion.
Nope. And you actually bring up a really good point with your cradle. I bought mine at my hobby shop. They're like $20. Folks, if you're going to work on your trains, get yourself a nice styrofoam cradle, um, because turning over an engine on anything that's not soft, um, if you don't have one yet, the best thing to do is to get yourself a whole bunch of towels, a lot of them, because you want to make a nice cushy surface. Because keep in mind that there are very delicate, small detail parts on a lot of engines, and if you turn it over on a hard surface, that little part could break off or something. So I highly recommend getting yourself a nice styrofoam train cradle. They make them. You can go online. I think a bunch of the the online web guys have a bunch of them in stock. You go down to your local hobby shop and ask them. I think I bought mine at $20. It was like 20 or $25 at my local train store, and it was one of the best purchases that I ever made. I use it constantly when I'm working on my engine. Especially if you have to turn your engine over and like take out the screws and stuff like that. You really kind of need it in a nice stable position. And this is one of those where it has like the small pocket in the middle, that's kind of indented. That way, when you put your engine in there, turned over, it sits there, and that styrofoam like really hugs that engine in there. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, Matt. That's a really important point.
Oh yeah, and plus, you don't want your engine to be damaged, by a cradle, and certainly don't put it on a wood or anything like that upside down with don't do that.
Please don't do that.
Yeah.
Nope. Yeah, I guess it depends on if we're talking like a Lion Chief where it's pretty, it's got a lot of molded in detail. It's not going to have a lot of detail, but even then, just get yourself a blanket. If you have a blanket, or even, what people use, like old pillows.
It's a good idea.
Get yourself an old pillow and put it on your workbench or wherever you're going to work on your train, and use that. But yes, please do not turn it over on any hard surface, because number one, you could damage something on top, and then number two, if it's not stable and it kind of falls over, you could damage something on the side too if it tips over. Really important tip there. Keep your train safe when you're working on them.
Mm-hmm. And going off your point with screws, what I use for screws, I have one of those little magnetic bowls that you get from Harbor Freight. Let me tell you, I love that thing. It's great. I have that. I have magnetic screwdrivers. I have one of those little things where you slide the screwdriver back and forth and it magnetizes it. I got those. I got little micro screwdrivers, which I love those. I love the flathead one, which I use flathead screwdrivers when I'm taking the screws out of the train, just because it won't strip the screw. And I've had screws strip like there's no tomorrow. So if I was to recommend something, get yourself a micro flathead, or I believe they come in both Phillips and flat in the same box. Just use it. That's what I use. And like I said, it's one of those opinionated things. But for me, I like the flathead screwdrivers for taking out the Phillips screws.
So now that we've talked about like a lot of maintenance items, you had brought up screwdrivers. So this is probably a good time to kind of talk about other other tools that we should be using when you're doing kind of maintenance or you're trying to do repairs on your engine. So why don't you tell us more about that, man?
Sure. So for like tools that I use, like I said, the aforementioned alligator clips, you can never have enough of those things. Go to Harbor Freight or Home Depot or wherever you get your tools and get like 2 or 3 packages of them, because you'll strip the heads on them, the teeth, and then they'll be useless. So get a bunch of them. But what I use them for all kinds of things. Like I said, when I'm oiling an engine, I throw it on the clips and I let it run. Usually depending on the engine, wheels are ground. I've had drawbars be ground. Obviously pickup rollers are for hot, but depends on the engine, obviously what's a ground. But you can use those. I use the clips for LEDs when I'm testing LEDs or converting something to LEDs. I also use soldering iron. So for that, you use that for pretty much anything. You can use it to repair stuff. You can use it when you're doing LED conversions like I do, you can it's invaluable for layout work as far as track. I solder all my wires for track.
So one of the things that I use that's been pretty helpful, and I think this should be for everybody, is your lighting. And what I mean by that is I ended up last year buying a really nice LED magnifying lamp that clamps. So you just kind of clamp it onto the side of a workbench, or you can clamp it to just anywhere where it's kind of like a vice clamp. And then you plug it in. Holy cow, dude, this thing has been awesome. I love it. It's and it's one of those where it has like the um it's got like an adjustable swivel arm, so you can kind of like move it anywhere you want, and like even turn the head any way you want. Having a really nice lighting source when you work on your engines is super important, because there's little intricate details on everything, and hey, where's this wire hooked to, or I really need to see this roller a little bit better. So yeah, highly, I think I bought mine for $60 on Amazon. It's paid itself back already, just for just how well it works, and gives me I'm an older guy too, so I really need the light and the extra magnifying if when I need it. So with that said, let's kind of move on to maybe not back to track maintenance, but what do we use to keep our track kind of like in working condition, and how we laid it down and stuff like that. So go ahead, Matt.
So for me and Matt, we both use Lionel Fast Track, so that's what I do, and him too. But as far as screwing the track down, I use these screws that I get from Amazon. They're number 4, and they got various different sizes. For Fast Track, I have 3/4 inch plywood for my layout, so I use the number 4 by come on, 3, 2, 1. I use the number 4 by 3/4 inch screws. They have longer ones. I also have the 1.25 inch variants, but the 3/4 of an inch work perfect. It gives it enough bite, and you can use just a manual screwdriver. You don't need a drill or anything. And that's one thing. I don't do pilot holes. I just have the
Me neither.
Thread of the screw bite into the wood, and that's just the way I go about it. It's just the easiest thing to do, at least for me.
Yeah, I use the same. Like I have the same thickness board for myself as well. And that's when I was screwing my train to the track, or when I was screwing my track to the board. Yeah, don't screw your train to the track.
No,
please.
don't do that.
When I was securing my track to the wood, I was just using my power drill, and I mean, just kind of if you have the right screw, it's just kind of like, and you're good to go.
Yep.
I can set the torque on mine, so you set it perfectly, and then it's like one shot, and you're good to go. Move on to the next one. So yeah, and that's kind of one thing to note too is, I know there's a lot of people that don't have a board. Or maybe they're kind of experimenting with getting a board up. But if you have kind of a set track already, man, get that fast track screwed down, because it helps immensely in keeping that track firmly connected to each other. I've done that for years. Even when I didn't have the plan firmly fixed out. I was just screwing my screws to the track. I think more importantly about safety, and just making sure that the track wouldn't slip out or come out, because not all fast track is created equally, and sometimes you have that fast track that fits like solid, like it's never coming out. Sometimes you have the fast track that you put it in and it's wiggly. So that's why I try to make sure I secure all my track down, even when I have a smaller plan out there, or when I had my initial plan out there, because you get a nice power drill, and it's just, you could bring up screws and move track around without any problems.
Yeah, it's not really that difficult, but yeah, you definitely want to screw it down. foolishly haven't really been doing it. I started doing it maybe about 2 years ago, and why I haven't done it since is anybody's guess. But for me, keeping that track screwed down is vital. Like you said, the power conductivity is a big deal. Once you got it screwed down, you can, manipulate the track how you need to, get it nice and tight, screw it down, and you'll be good to go. You'll have solid power throughout the whole loop.
Yep, I agree. And speaking of power, I don't know how you have yours all set up, but the way I do it is that I do use a power strip, but I use it for everything but the legacy, my legacy charging base, my legacy remote itself, the 990 base, because you do not want to plug that into a power strip if you don't have to. I know it definitely has to be plugged into a grounded outlet, so you definitely need a 3-prong outlet for that. I have mine kind of separate for that, but everything else I have on on one power strip. That way, when I turn it on, everything comes on. So, I have a separate transformer for my lighting on my layout, and then I have my MTH Wi-Fi. I have my my 180 brick as well. So I like everything coming on at the same time. And then I have that kind of securely ran into a grounded outlet as well, making sure everything is secured correctly, plugged in right. And that's kind of stuff that you can go through your maintenance as well. Like check all your, check to make sure that your plugs are all plugged in. Okay, so when it comes to power, I do recommend that you get yourself a nice multimeter. Uh, that has become invaluable to me for finding dead spots, for finding bad track. I mean, this is stuff that is cheap. You can buy a multimeter. I have a Craftsman multimeter, but I mean, you could buy one for like $20. It's got the leads on the end, and you put one on your outside rail, one on the inside rail, and then you can kind of measure the voltage coming off the track. And I've actually found bad track by doing that. Especially if you have power issues with some particular engines and you've cleaned the track and everything seems fine. Take that multimeter and check the track itself, and you can check each part. Each track is separated, obviously, by that crease. So you can test each track independently to see if it's pulling, between 15 and 18 volts. If it's not, if you're finding a piece of track that's like under 15 volts, well, you might have an issue there, and you might have to replace that track. It could be as simple as just bending one of the center pins down a certain way, because maybe it's not. I know you say you solder everything, Matt, so that kind of that fixes that for you. I don't solder my tracks together. I just go with the fast track, and before I clamp them together, I make sure that the middle the pins are correct, and then I'll kind of lock them together. But even with soldering, sometimes you can find a bad piece of track, or maybe the track itself is just gone bad. It's just something went over it, something got misaligned or popped out. So totally recommend getting a multimeter. They're super inexpensive and they're definitely worth it.
Sure. Actually, I want to correct you on one thing. I don't solder my track together. I solder the wires to the track, to the little pins on the bottom of the track, the clips.
Yes, I'm sorry.
That's what I solder to. But
that's what I thought too. I'm sorry if I said it. No, I don't think you actually do solder your track, but
there are people that do that. But
there are. Yeah. No, that's too much for me.
Yeah. So. I did want to say about the meter. I should have put this in the locomotive section. The meter is hands down. It's the most valuable tool next to the soldering iron.
Yeah, I agree.
You can use that for anything, whether it's bad track, you need to use the continuity to find where a wire goes. Even on your layout, besides a train, use that. That thing is absolutely invaluable. Definitely go buy one. You know, you don't have to go buy a $400 Fluke. You can buy. I have a Cantech from Harbor Freight. I love it. It's great.
Yep. Yep. And a fantastic tool to have in your workbench toolbox when working on your trains. And guess what? You know, it applies to stuff in your house too. It's just not there to help you with your trains. I mean, you can use it for anything around the house as well. So I've used it to check a couple of sockets, and I'm a computer guy, so I use it to do some voltage testing on boards and stuff like that. So yeah, it's definitely worth the money. Because otherwise, if you don't have one, trying to find that that bad track is next to freaking impossible, because then you're swapping out track, and it's just like with a multimeter, it take you 2 minutes to find the bad track. If you didn't have one, well, you could spend up to a half hour to an hour trying to find the bad track. So
For sure.
highly recommend it.
All right. So Matt talked about how he has his system powered up with the power strip, and so I figured I'll talk about mine real quick. So for mine, I'm in the planning stages of redoing my control panel, as I use the Lionel Fast Track switches. And so for me, I want to redo it so I can have all my manual switch remotes able to be all in a line for the panel. So for me, what I use just a power strip that I have plugged into a grounded outlet. For me, I have mine plugged into a smart plug so I can use it with my Amazon Echo system, which is really pretty cool. But for me, I have just a standard transformer that I'm using for my track power, which is an MRC Pure Power Dual transformer. And then I have a separate K-line transformer that I'm using for all my accessories. So I have it flipped in that way, so that way the track is separate from the accessories and vice versa. As far as my legacy and my Wi-Fi units, I don't use the charging port on the legacy. I just use non-rechargeable batteries in it, just because I've had issues with mine. It gets hot and stuff like that, so I don't really like to leave it on for extended periods of time. So I don't bother with that. When I got to replace the batteries, I replace them. So I really could hide the legacy base, deep in the layout somewhere, and I may do that. I don't know, but. So for me, that's what I use. The Wi-Fi's, I just have them connected to the power strip. So once I click the LED on, everything turns on, the accessories, the Wi-Fi's, the trains, legacy, everything. And also my TIUs, I have that hooked into the accessory port of my track transformer. So when I click that on, the TIU gets its power as well. And that's how I got it set up.
Just one little thing on that, and then I think you said that was really important, because I was told this by a gentleman who repairs locomotives, O-scale locomotives, and he said basically don't ever use the rechargeable feature on the remote.
Yeah.
You could have it's. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that it's prone to having issues. So, and I do the same thing you do, Matt. I turned off the recharger on the base, and I just use standard alkaline batteries for it.
Yeah, it's just the way to go. Now, I've heard that the Legacy expansion set, not the main one that you buy to get the Legacy signal, the expansion, the number 993, that one does not have the issue. So if you want to charge your remote there, you can, but the 990, the regular Legacy base, that one, don't use the charger in that. I don't know what the difference is between the two, but the 993, I guess, is the one that if you want to desperately charge your batteries with the charger and the Legacy set, do it. But I still would just use the alkaline non-rechargers and just deal with it. That's what I would do.
They last long enough.
Sure.
I can go over a month, but everything depends on like how much are you running your trains, right? But I mean, I replaced mine, I don't know, a couple months ago, and I'm still fine. So it's been good for 2 months. I don't run trains every single day, But, I do run them, when I do run them for just, sometimes between 15 minutes and 45 minutes. And the alkaline batteries are fine. And definitely, like Matt said, the safer way to go.
Mm-hmm. Don't want to start no fires now.
Nope. All right. Well, I think that pretty much wraps it up for maintenance. We did want to keep this one a little tighter and a little cleaner. I just wanted to go over how Matt and I maintain our locomotives and our layouts, and we thought we'd just kind of pass that information on to you fine folks. That way, if you have any questions about it, and again, we're not the the one-stop source for all this information. Check out the O-Gauge if you have questions. You can check out the O-Gauge forums. You can leave us a comment as well. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to help you. There's plenty of ways to leave comments for us. If you're actually going to Podbean, you can follow us. You can make comments. We are also on iTunes and Google Podcasts. We'd appreciate it if you have time. If you are using one of those sources to listen to us, if you could just leave us some feedback, leave us a review. We'd appreciate pretty much like that. Really help us out in kind of spreading the word around and getting us up on that algorithm, right? So we pop up in people's searches. Matt, where can people find you on social media?
They can find me on YouTube under Matt-Trainlover9943. Then I also have a Facebook page under the same name.
All right, and I can be found on YouTube at West Chicago Railroad, and I'm also on Facebook at West Chicago Model Railroad. So again, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you downloading and listening to our podcast. We're having a lot of fun. We got plenty of episodes to do, all kinds of topics we're going to cover. So if you enjoy model railroading, especially obviously O-scale model railroading, we want you to come with us on our adventure here.